Hi everyone, let's play a game. And the reason why I'm thinking about let's play a game is I'm trying to think of a way in which to explain where we begin and where the world ends and where the world ends and we begin. I think this way, this approach of dealing it through the context of something that you can visualize, like a game, like a board game, would best suit us in arriving at our dominion rights, what I've been explaining through this series, versus those rights that we've agreed to voluntarily, albeit by playing within the world. Now, the three games I'll say that there's a choice of is either Risk or Chess or Monopoly. Now, I'm going to have to dissect each one of those games to see whether actually do you have a choice to sit down with me and play those games? Well, Risk, the game, is played by government, so you would have to be agreeing to be government in order to play the game. And I think that most people that are watching this have no interest in being in operating as an agent for government, directly, immediately for government, so being employed directly, but you're still employed indirectly by being a citizen. So we're saying the agreement to play Risk means that you are agreeing to be paid directly through government. So Risk, let's say, essentially is off the table. Now let's look at chess. Well, guess what? Chess is not really a game that we can master because that game is already mastered by those who we don't even see in the world. Those are the behind the scenes, the puppet masters, if you will. And what's the feature of chess? It's to be able to move. The feature of chess is the ability of an individual to have the insight to make more moves than the other person so that whatever they move, they will always be in a defensive pros, pos, uh, po, in a defensive position than they would be if they were more advanced than you and had moved more times in their head than you did. So what's the feature of chess would be to in order to win the game is your ability to move more, have more moves played in your head than what's been played on the board. So chess is what the elite are, those behind the scene that we do not get to sit down at the round table with because we have no interest with them and they have no interest with us. They're playing a whole different game, but they are managing the world indirectly through the moves of chess that then allow for other games such as in divisive agreements to be played. Okay, they set the foundations to the order in which everything else under it then is is not directly attached to. Okay, so here's the things I have written that if oh maybe I have to digress a bit and realize that if we're not playing Risk and we're not playing chess, then the only game that's available for us is to play Monopoly. Okay. Now, it's the fact that once we agree to play, then are not the rules of that game uh, that feature that then governs us? Are we then not saying, well, once we sit down to play, we have agreed to be governed by those rules at that time? Thereby, our rights of dominion, which means our own self-interest, are no longer in play. So, for instance, I'm not going to go out gardening. If I sit down to play Monopoly and agree to play with a group of people to play Monopoly, well, I'm not going to cannot just get up and start gardening or go and say, oh, by the way, I'll be back. I'm off to a trip in Mexico, or I'm going to go make dinner for myself. Um, no, it has to be an agreement with everyone else because I've already agreed to play the game. Therefore, that overreaches my right to do whatever I want to do when I want to do it. It makes common sense, right? So, now Risk and Monopoly are games that evolve from that. Risk and Monopoly rules can evolve from those games, and they do not have to be strictly adhered to, because people, I have seen many times, decide to do things differently once you get an agreement with everyone else that, hey, you know what, let's all agree to play this game this way, because then it's going to have a different outcome, and I found it a better play. Or you might want to shorten the play, especially like a game of Risk, and say, you know what, I only have 2 hours, so we have a 2-hour time limit. So that then says whoever has the most countries and the most armaments or whatever it is, then that is going to be the winner, not us finalizing until there's one last man standing. Okay, so you can adjust the rules. Okay. Now, like I've said, chess is, no matter where you travel in the world, it plays exactly the same, whereby all the pieces move upon predetermined limitations. And they act and are reacted upon according to the rules of the game, to the extent no status and has more power than the other while under the laws of the game. For instance, a pawn can topple a queen. Okay? So it is the laws, not the status, when we're playing chess, that excites the right of the laws of the game to establish rules over action. Therefore, the law creates equality among the statuses used, and the sentient being the one that is holding or moving the pieces of chess, is the only thing that can move them all, or has a right to make a choice to move any one of those. And that's mirrored in society, that there's all these statuses, and it's only the driver, the sentient being, can move any one of those statuses. Okay? Now, the purpose of this video is to assist us, like I've already mentioned, to determine where we begin as the driver and the driving force to move those pieces, and where we are actually volunteering to play the game. Thereby, those pieces represent an action that's going to have a repercussion based on the movements we make within the game. Okay, so it is our action always that then allows for the game to continue, but the game itself doesn't continue without our own action and making a choice. Okay, now, as I've already meant, the majority are all agreeing to Monopoly. If you're a citizen, you are not playing Risk per se, you are playing Monopoly, bar none. And that's, I think, the perfect game, as it most resembles the exact nature of what we're dealing with when we intercourse within the world. So let's play, and while we're in play, we compare our actions witnessed in society to see where the true power is and where we're giving it up in order to play according to the rules. Where is it that we are actually being the driver, and where is it that we're lost within the game and using the status of the token that we're using to then reach a predetermined conclusion for us. All right? The world is notice of the entire accumulation of all agreements to then use a token, a citizen agreement namely, that can only ever make purchase to those things offered in the world. The exact same feature that is allowing us to make purchases with those things that are available to us within the game of Monopoly only. Those are only the choices we have. That, to me, and I've mentioned it before in another video, is not a true choice, because remember, we're still the driver. We can play the game or not play the game. That, to me, is the real choice. That is our intent. But while we're in the game, we only have the choices that are offered to us within the game itself. And the same is with the world. We only have the choices within the world. And so the choices that we make within the world have nothing to do with the reality that is managed by those who are playing chess. And so using rules completely different, chess of course using different rules completely different, yet are the preemption to all games played that are claiming a right to a thing other than their inherent autonomy. Okay, so I've sort of beaten that point to death, but again, I really want to inculcate into our minds a separation of powers, and then when we're giving up our powers in order to play the game. Now, what is the objective of monopoly? The objective of monopoly is to bankrupt your neighbor before they try to do the same to you. Guess what? That is exactly the objective of the world. To amass more than anyone else. And amass more than anyone else subject to what's available to oneself within the world. Okay? As in the game, you're using tokens, fiat money, deeds, and titles to accumulate only those interests relative to the game. The choice is only within the game and has nothing to do with your rights that exist before you sit down and agree to play. We can now all see that. Now, every citizen's proof is proof that they are in voluntary agreement to play. No exceptions. Okay? Now, when we are sitting down and so immediately agreed to play subject to the foundation of the rules, as by the very fact that the game we are playing is Monopoly. So therefore, it's got a board, it's got placements of where you can do certain things and exact different interest. And subject to that, you move through accordance to the dice because you're actually playing risk because you never know where you're going to land. And when you pass go, you then collect an allowance of $250 and then you start again the process of moving around. It's that circular movement. Well, it's not a square, but you're moving that token and you're at risk to whatever you do land on, or you also have an opportunity to grab something that you did not have before, like property or houses or hotels or whatever. But you're sitting down to play that, and now those are the exact rules. Now, if I look at common law, that would be equivalent to the common law. Those are the exact rules that you're using to move that token around the board, and can only move that way. Okay? And you can and based on those rules that are succinct, you can then make determinations based on where you land and what things you wish to excite based on your own interest while you're moving along that board. Okay? That's like the foundational rules to play the game. It's called Monopoly. Here are the rules. That's common law. It's black and white. Now, you choose a token that represents the entirety of your moves upon the board. Welcome to your straw man, which is essentially proof that you agreed to enter a course in the world so as to be noticed with the right to protect those purchases you made according to the rule. Essentially, that everyone that's playing the game, they have the same right to purchase or to do things with that property as you are allowed to, but only with the extent of those rules within the game. So you have a rule or right of action the same as they have. You're equal under those rules to do whatever you wish to do as you move your token or you move your strawman within the world as you move your token within the game Monopoly. Everyone is equal. Okay? Now, Monopoly, unlike chess, you can make your own rules up in addition to the foundation rules of chess. You can add things. Now, this is where it gets more exact and more exciting as we develop this. So now we can understand jurisdictions to move where the issue is really, and what are we asking our courts to do. So let's say within the game of Monopoly, we also say that we want a judge. Now, the judge has nothing to do with the game of Monopoly. He's not playing the game of Monopoly. He is a third party that's sitting there waiting to address any issues that we may have according to the game, that we aren't able to come to our own remedy, and because we're unable to go to our, to find a remedy, and so that the game can be continued to play, we need some third party to come in and say, help us out, so that they can make a final order so that the game can continue to be played. If we don't have that, we may just be, somebody might just throw up the board game and pieces go everywhere. I'm sure that some of us have seen that, get upset, move, say, I'm not playing anymore. The game is stopped. We can't progress forward. Therefore, the same with the world. And the use of what we're allowed to use within the land, within the world, comes at a stop, and no one can move forward, and that will never work within any society, because we have to work within the confidence that the game will continue to play, and that things will be settled regardless of how many arguments and issues are raised during that point. Now let's go from here. So let's say, as we're moving across the board, somebody passes go and says, okay, I want $300. And everybody goes, well, hold it now. The rules of the game, you can only collect 250. Okay. That person then makes an argument and say, you know what, because of the cost incurred by the more times that we move around the game, more property is bought, more fines are thereby can be experienced, and more times we'll maybe we might have to pay on inheritance tax or community taxes. So I think accordingly we should incrementally raise our allowances based on how many more times we move around the board. Now everybody else within the game say, you know what, I agree with that. And then the other party, democratically, yeah, I agree with it. Maybe the fourth person says, you know what, I don't agree with it. Well, 3-1, we're going to incrementally increase our allowances as we move around the board, because our risk is in direct competition to the amount of times that we move around the board, and therefore we are at greater risk of losing more money because of the amount of property that's been accumulated, and those things added to those properties being accumulated. So that's why we're going to increase our allowances. So now that's the new rule. That's equity. Now, equity is going to go against that new agreement. It's not going to look to the rule of the game, because that's succinct. It's $250 when you pass go. Everyone has agreed to increase their allowances when they pass go incrementally based on how many times they move around the board. So now equity, that's why it's arbitrary. It evolves according to the changes made within the game itself, according to the rules of the game. All right. So, jurisdictionally, if you have a problem that you want to bring up to the rules of the game, then you would have to excite the jurisdiction according to that rule, which is the same idea as the common law. You would have to go to common law. But if you have a disagreement based on the issues that were created in equity, you have to go to equity to make that determination, because we're not dealing with the rules anymore. And so let's use this as our segue and continue on with this idea. So as you're playing the game, one of the players who have the most interest in land passes go and says, okay, now I want $400. Everybody goes, well, why are you jumping so high? And the person says, well, I think because I have so much more than the rest of you, I should get a proportionate share, higher amount of allowance than you. So when I get $400, you guys are still stuck at $300. And then the other three players are going like, what the fuck? You think that now you get $400 because you're making an argument, you have more property, therefore more expenditures, and we are still relegated to $300 when we go across that price goal? Now game has stopped. The game has stopped. You can't move forward because of this issue. This person's adamant, thinking that they have a right, and the other players are saying no. Now, democratically, do the other players have a right to overreach this new interest? Yeah. But that player says, you know what, I'm not going to move until I do get my matter heard. So let's go to a judge. So you bring the matter before the judge. And the judge looks at the power of the agreement that you made. And the power of that agreement was you're going to move incrementally, everyone equally. And this new player is coming in and saying, no, I get more based on the amount of property that I've accumulated. So I should get more wealth, and my allowance should be higher. So the judge is going to look to the foundation of the agreement, to the spirit of what that agreement was made, to make a determination, to make it an order, in order to provide remedy that now that an order has been made, then that argument, however it's, for whatever side, is no longer going to be in play. So the play can be continued. Because everyone agrees to go to the court, thereby the judge decides means that is the absolute, therefore play can continue. Okay? Now, creates another problem in equity. See, this is why equity evolves, continues along, because everything that you change from the common law, from the subject rules of game monopoly, you've got to now make redresses and I got my words coming, my mind of you've got to you got to adjust things accordingly to those allowances made, and I'll tell you why. Let's say you continue to move and you accumulate more and more money incrementally. Well, sooner or later, everybody's going to have piles of money. Thereby, somewhere along the line, you're not going to be able to bank. It's going to come to a point you can't bankrupt your neighbor anymore. Therefore, the game will never end, and thereby, you've never reached the foundation of the rules of the game anyway, which was to bankrupt your neighbor. So how are you going to adjust that? Well, the only way you're going to do that is now you're going to start adjusting other rules. Well, the hotel was, and it's been a long time since I played Monopoly, so I have no idea what a hotel cost, and I'm sure it's based on the title deed you have. So let's say you're on Park Place, and we'll just plot that out as the title deed, and it says each hotel is $400, and there's a cap. Okay, let's say there's a cap on it. Well, you then have to decide, well, we can't have that. We can't entertain that cap anymore. We're going to have to use incrementally as well as we adjust our allowances incrementally. But that also means with community tax and our inheritance taxes and the and the title deeds themselves. So everything is going to have to be adjusted incrementally in order to meet the objective of the game itself, which was to bankrupt your neighbor. So now new rules have to be created and new things have to be adjusted, and there you have it. That's the world. It's continually to be evolved based on the interest to arrive at a predetermined outcome. And guess what? That predetermined outcome is happening right now, whether you care for it or not, because you're in the world and you're a citizen and you're playing the game. So thereby, it has to meet its end, which is to settle. If you've been reading or watching my series before, the trust for sale, to which now is the foundational principle of the world that we're playing. So it has to meet its end in order to meet its objective to then move into a new level. Okay, didn't want to digress, and I'm not going to go there, but because I'm going to then overstep where I need to go when we deal with the rules of the game itself. Okay, now we've got an idea what equity is. Okay, but let's say you're playing the game and that same person makes his argument that he wants to go incrementally raise them by $300. The rest of the players says, no, we want to stay by the rules, but you can't move anymore because that person is steadfast on the fact that he thinks because for his argument, thereby you need that third party. Judicial independence. Again, the judge has no dogs in a fight. He's not playing the game. He's completely different outside of the game itself. Okay? The court system is not bad. It's only going to adjudicate based on the matters you bring in and based on the issues you bring in. But this time, guess what? You bring in the issue of the rules of the game, which is synonymous with the idea of a point of law. You're going to the foundation. You're not going to those things that you've created while you were playing the game, which is equity. You're going to the foundation. So you can't, again, move because this person's being stubborn and he's going to he's just going to say, yep, that's it, I'm not playing anymore. Okay, would you agree to go to court and get this matter settled? Bring in your argument and we'll bring in a point of law. Yeah, let's do that. That's the only way you can settle a matter. So you go to court. It's simple then, isn't it? You go to court and say, Your Honor, here's the rules of the game. Same as I did. Your Honor, here's the rules. Here's the common law interest. Okay? It says right here, it's black and white. When you pass go, it's $250. It doesn't say you can move in incrementally. There's no other rules or anything added to that. Here's the rules. To which the judge will go, yeah, that's the rules. That's it. There's nothing more to speak about because you're not speaking to an arbitrary power, which the high courts of chancery and all the foundation of the world uses to make determinations based on the new agreements. You're going right to the law. Are we understanding jurisdictions and concepts and subject matter a little bit more on this? How we are volunteering by our own actions, and only the judge can deal with your actions. Sure enough, it happens regularly that people come in and says, whoever's got the most force wins. No, that's not the case. I've just proved that by the game of chess. A pawn can topple a queen. So is that true? Statement true? No. Okay. Secondarily, is a statement true whereby you can go to the law to deal with whether it has been predetermined to make an order to seek remedy according to the law? Yes, you can. So is anyone enforcing anything on you? No. But where the enforcement comes from, the idea of enforcement comes, is that it's going to enforce the arbitrary power that you've agreed to by being a citizen, by allowing those things to happen. And we can even pack that a little bit more. Let's say that same player says, I'm going to move. He's agreed to increase his allowances incrementally. Now, no one argues that. So just think of the same idea of government. You don't argue that. He says, my allowance is going to be $300 now when I pass go. Which, sure enough, it's overreaching the rules of the game. Same idea, it's overreaching the common law rules in order to create a new realm of play within the realms of the arbitrary nature of equity itself. He says, the government says, I'm increasing, or that player, sorry, I'm sort of intermingling that, I'm using that player as a government, as a feature of government, but I'm increasing my allowance to $300. Now, each player, if no one argues that, when they pass go, they have an opportunity to do the same thing. So let's say the next player says, okay, I have the equal opportunity to do that, so they collect 300, and the next player collects 300. But then there's one individual says, no, I'm staying with the rules of the game. I'm collecting $250. Does that now remove the agreement of $300 because the other person is playing by the rules of the game? No. In fact, that other player can go with $300 and everybody can continue with $250. But if nobody says anything and no one makes an argue and it doesn't get settled, that person can continue on $300. Is he still meeting the objective of the game to bankrupt a neighbor? Yeah, he'll do it faster because he's going to accumulate more money than the rest. And by the law of averages, he's going to have more option to get more property, and thereby, while you land on his property, he's more entitled to have more value derived from that. So what I mean is, if you don't argue those matters within the confines of the game itself, it's going to continue on because everyone else has the same opportunity based on their statuses within that game. Now, but I can't take the analogy too far because everyone in the game has the same status, unlike chess, which is the person playing the game has the same status, but within the game itself, there are different statuses within the game, which more resemble the ideas of the common law and equity. But within the game, everyone's on the same status. Everyone's a citizen. And if no one argues one point, so let's say someone steals your car, did you know that you can possess property by wrong or by right? Meaning that you can go and take property, and if no one argues that it's their property and shows that they have title, as long as somebody's on that property and taking care of it, is paying rent or whatever, doing whatever, the system doesn't care. Because it doesn't need to care, since it is up to you as an individual to correct that wrong. It's not up to the system to correct it. The system has enough, with all their statutes, within the collective society. But if I go and steal a car and nobody says anything ever, well, then the car's mine. No one knows any better. There's nobody saying that it's not your car. If you don't ever discuss it, there's no one to know any different. It's my car. You steal a car, you say it's my car. And if no one, I don't have to beat the thing to death, but you can understand how it operates. It's that each thing can continue on, and that's how we get into the evils of equity. And that's the idea of the foundational principle of the Western society is the Christian doctrine, which is the forgiveness of sin, because that's all you're ever able to do within the system, because the system is predicated on bankrupting your neighbor, creating distress, creating problems, creating disease, creating fictional concepts. You're operating in sin, which is then through the idea of equity allows you to not be seen in the law, which is the Father, which is the rules of the game. That's what equity is, and that's what biblically they're speaking and making reference to. They're making reference to people that take the idea of what they're speaking about Jesus, and so forth, as actual. They're using it as an analogy to show how they created equity to evolve from therefrom. And while you're in equity, you are removed from the sins that would be noticed in the common law or the law, which is the Father, which is that Old Testament, which is, exact. You steal, your arm gets cut off. Whatever the reason, it doesn't matter what the reason is. Hey, my family was hungry. No, the rule's right here. It says you steal from another, you lose your arm. See, that's the Old Testament. That's the Father, to which then equity sprang because people wanted to be removed from the exacting rules of the law in order to create new interest. Okay, and if you've been through my series, you can see how we've done that. Okay, so I hope that's is a great way to finally create separation between what is dominion, which is the exact rights that can never be taken away. You cannot be forced to play the game. No one is forcing you to play the game. So law is not force. Law is only subsequent to notice of your agreements. Are you in common law or are you playing equity? And then if you bring in an issue in equity, well, it's only going to deal with the issue in equity. It's not going to deal with the issue in common law, nor is it ever going to deal with your dominion rights as a live sentient being. So when you bring in live sentient being into a position of common law and say, I got a right to land, then say, and here are my rights under the Constitution, you know what you just did there? You just merged, which the law will not look at or a judge will not look at. You just merged three different subject matters, which have three different subject remedies because they're subsequent to three different remedies afforded based on that agreement to the subject matter. So one being dominion, when I said I'm a life sentient being. Next I've said I'm saying it's the land, to which is a common law interest, to which then I'm starting saying I have a right under the Constitution, which is an equitable remedy, which is the arbitrary nature under a trust. Now do you see why the judge can say you're an optoleticant or you're wrong, and they throw the book at you, and some of them, and people go, hey, I just won in equity. Dude, you know what you just did? You won an argument along the board game. That's what you did. You didn't bring in the law yet, so I don't think you won anything. You won anything within the argument of the arbitrary nature of equity. Equity is soft. It's for those who can morally move, or morally not be measured morally against their sins by playing the game itself, which is to bankrupt your neighbor. And that thing, you're just saying, I won within that arena. You're not, nothing's moral there, because it's all based on the fiction. It's based on how you want to evolve within the sins of the game. Now, if you want to deal with common law, now you're more honorable, because within that game, it's black or white, man. You're going to the rules. That's a different order. And if you want dominion, that's full moral responsibility, because you're no longer subject to those rules, but you're commanding those interests in common law and equity by the very fact that you are not doing anything to enact the games or the rules themselves. You are outside the agreement, to which common law cannot entertain, and to which equity definitely can entertain. Dominion is separate. The law has no rights to your dominion. Those are inherent. That's before sitting in the game. Once you play to the game, you're subject to the rules that are founded upon the game, which is the foundational principles of the rules itself. In order for it to act the game, the movements, the dice, the board, everything, it's the foundation principles, to which then, while you're in play, then bring in equitable approach to then create new rules not steadfast within the common law. And 37 minutes, here we go. So let's see if that helps us all now make an alignment to realize when we're giving up our power, we are, and even saying that, look at that. If I'm with full right to give up my power. Do you see how that now empowers me? It actually says I'm the one who's always had the power. You see, in the same idea of the words out of Oz, when you pull back the curtain, the Oz, because you're playing in Oz can only give you what those remedies are within its nature. It could never remove you back to your true common law rights. It can only enact those things that it itself has agreed to and what you've agreed to while playing in Oz. Thereby, I can't give you a real brain, because that's life. That's nature. I can't give you that. I have to give you a certificate that you've been noticed to give, and you've been acting your brain. Or I can't instill in heart into you, because again, that's nature. That's of creation. I can only give you a measurement based on how you've acted within the game yourself, and therefore I'll give you, a paste on heart. I cannot give you a real one, and I can't give you real courage. That is measured by what you do within the game itself. But as soon as you're ready to not want to play in the game, then tap your heels together, in essence, because you've always had that power. You've always had dominion, and same as you've always had the right to play the game or not to play the game. And with that, my throat's getting a little dry, and let's have fun with this one. And now when you look at the videos, maybe we can piece in how you interact with life, and then every time you do so, you can say, I'm doing this, I'm doing this, I'm doing this, okay? Now you've got full power. God bless the God within, as that's only ever been the God ever realized in any one thing, is the God within. Ye are gods.